I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Patricia Vandermeer standing in my driveway at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, her breath forming angry little clouds in the frigid February air. Patricia was the president of our homeowners association in Pine Ridge, Colorado, a small development nestled in the mountains about 40 minutes outside of Denver. She was 53 years old, always wore her blonde hair in that severe bob that seemed to be a requirement for women who spent their lives making everyone else miserable, and she had a clipboard surgically attached to her hand at all times. This morning was no exception. "Ethan Henderson," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the cold morning air. "We need to talk about your violations." I was already in a bad mood. My coffee maker had broken that morning. I had a conference call in an hour that I absolutely could not miss since I worked from home as a software consultant. And now, Patricia was standing there like some kind of suburban grim reaper ready to deliver bad news. "Morning, Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What violations?" She flipped through the papers on her clipboard with the precision of a prosecuting attorney. "Your trash bins were visible from the street for 3 hours past collection time last Thursday. Your Christmas lights weren't removed by February 1st, which was yesterday. And your walkway has excessive ice buildup, which violates Section 14.6 of our HOA guidelines regarding winter maintenance and safety hazards." I stared at her. "Patricia, the trash collection was delayed because of the snowstorm. I brought the bins in as soon as I got home from work calls. The Christmas lights are literally coming down this weekend because I just got back from visiting my sister in Phoenix. And the ice buildup is because we got 8 inches of snow 2 days ago, and I have been shoveling and salting twice a day." "Excuses," she said, making a note on her clipboard. "The rules exist for everyone, Ethan. You will receive formal violation notices in the mail, and each one carries a $50 fine. $150 because my trash bins were out for 3 extra hours during a snowstorm, per violation per day," she corrected. "So that is actually $450 total." I felt my jaw clench. This was typical Patricia. She had been HOA president for 3 years now, and in that time, she had turned our quiet little neighborhood into something that felt more like a minimum security prison. We had gotten violation notices for having the wrong shade of white trim on our shutters. My neighbor, Tom, got fined because his lawn was a 1/4 inch too long when he was in the hospital having emergency surgery. Another neighbor, the Johnsons, got a citation because their 6-year-old drew a hopscotch grid on their own driveway with washable chalk. "This is ridiculous," I said. "This is community standards," Patricia replied. "If you have a problem with the rules, you are welcome to attend the monthly HOA meeting and voice your concerns. Though I should mention that the rules were voted on and approved by the board, of which I am the deciding vote." Of course she was. Patricia had stacked the board with her friends. Margaret from 3 houses down, who spent her days spying on everyone through her front window. Robert, who was retired and seemed to have nothing better to do than measure everyone's grass height. And Linda, who was Patricia's actual sister. "I will be salting my walkway again this afternoon," I said through gritted teeth. "See that you do," Patricia said. Then she turned on her heel and started walking back toward her own house, which was directly across the street from mine. I watched her go, feeling my blood pressure rising. Patricia's house was, of course, perfect. It was a 2-story colonial painted in an approved shade of cream with dark green shutters. Her walkway was pristine, her mailbox looked like it had been installed that morning, and her lawn looked like a golf course even under the snow. Everything about her property screamed control and order. I went back inside, made instant coffee because my regular maker was still broken, and tried to calm down before my conference call. The call went fine, but I spent the whole time distracted, thinking about Patricia and her stupid clipboard and her stupid rules. After the call ended around 9, I decided to go outside and deal with the walkway situation before Patricia could generate another violation notice. I grabbed my snow shovel, a bag of ice melt, and headed out into the cold. The temperature had dropped overnight, and everything was coated in a fresh layer of ice. I spent about 30 minutes chipping away at the frozen patches on my walkway, spreading salt and ice melt liberally. My walkway ran from my front door, down about 20 feet to where it met the driveway, and then continued along the side of the driveway to the street. It was a decent amount of area to cover, but I was thorough. When I finished, I looked up and saw Patricia standing in her front window, watching me. She had her phone out and appeared to be taking pictures, probably documenting that I was finally doing what she had demanded. I gave her a sarcastic wave and headed back inside. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I worked, I ate lunch, I took a break to order a new coffee maker online for next day delivery. Around 4 in the afternoon, I noticed it had started snowing again, light flurries that were pretty but not heavy enough to cause any real accumulation. I was in the middle of reviewing some code when I heard a loud scraping sound outside. I looked out my front window and felt my stomach drop. Patricia was in my front yard with a snow shovel, and she was scooping up the snow from her own walkway and throwing it onto mine. I stood there for a moment, unable to believe what I was seeing. She was actually, deliberately, transferring snow from her property onto mine. Big shovelfuls of snow and ice that she was heaving over the low hedge that separated our properties, landing right on the walkway I had spent all that time clearing. I threw open my front door and stepped outside. "Patricia, what the hell are you doing?" She paused, leaning on her shovel, and looked at me with an expression of pure smugness. "I am clearing my walkway, as required by HOA regulations. Where I put the excess snow is my business, as long as it is not on public property. You are putting it on my property." "Your property line extends to the hedge," she said, gesturing with her shovel. "This snow is landing on your lawn and walkway, which is your responsibility to maintain. If you do not want snow on your property, perhaps you should install better barriers." I could not believe what I was hearing. This was beyond petty. This was vindictive. "You are doing this on purpose because I question the violations," I said. "I am doing this because I need to clear my walkway," Patricia replied. "Not everything is about you, Ethan." She went back to shoveling, throwing another massive pile of snow and ice directly onto the walkway I had just cleared. I watched as the mixture of snow, ice chunks, and salt from her walkway scattered across mine, undoing all my work from that morning. "This is harassment," I said. "This is property maintenance," she countered. "If you would like to file a complaint with the HOA board, you know how to reach us." The circular logic was making my head hurt. She was the HOA board, essentially. Filing a complaint with her about her own behavior was pointless. I went back inside and tried to calm down. I told myself that engaging with her was exactly what she wanted. Patricia thrived on conflict and control. The best thing I could do was ignore her and clean up the mess later. But as I watched her continue to shovel for another 20 minutes, piling more and more snow onto my property, I felt my resolve weakening. This was not just about snow anymore. This was about Patricia using her position in the HOA to bully and harass people who did not fall in line with her vision of how the neighborhood should be. When she finally finished and went back inside her house, I counted to 10, then grabbed my shovel again and headed out. The sun was starting to set, and the temperature was dropping fast. Everything Patricia had thrown onto my walkway was already starting to freeze solid. I worked for another 45 minutes, clearing the snow again, breaking up ice chunks, spreading more salt and ice melt. By the time I finished, it was dark, and I was exhausted and furious. I went inside, made dinner, and tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. But around 8 o'clock, I looked outside and saw Patricia taking more pictures of my walkway with her phone, using a flashlight to illuminate the area. She was documenting something, probably trying to find some new violation to cite me for. I closed the curtains and tried to focus on anything else. The next morning, I woke up to another gray, cold day. The temperature had stayed below freezing overnight, and everything was coated in a thick layer of frost. I made my instant coffee, which tasted terrible but at least contained caffeine, and checked my email. There were 3 new messages from the Pine Ridge HOA, all from Patricia's official HOA email address. The first was a formal violation notice for the trash bins. The second was a formal violation notice for the Christmas lights. The third was a new violation notice for inadequate snow and ice removal resulting in safety hazards on property walkways. Each notice included photographs that Patricia had taken, dates and times, and references to specific sections of the HOA bylaws. Each one also included a fine of $150 and a statement that failure to remedy the violations within 48 hours would result in additional daily fines. I sat there staring at my computer screen, feeling something break inside me. This was insane. This was beyond any reasonable interpretation of community standards or safety regulations. This was a personal vendetta, and Patricia was using the HOA as her weapon. I spent the next hour researching Colorado HOA laws, reading through our neighborhood covenants, and looking up similar cases. What I found was not encouraging. HOAs in Colorado had broad authority to enforce their rules, and homeowners who wanted to challenge them had to go through a lengthy and expensive legal process. Most people just paid the fines and moved on because fighting was too costly and time-consuming. But something about this situation made me unwilling to just roll over and accept it. Maybe it was the principle of the thing. Maybe it was the image of Patricia deliberately throwing snow onto my property while maintaining that she was just following the rules. Whatever it was, I decided I was going to push back. I drafted a formal response to Patricia's violation notices, citing the fact that I had been maintaining my property in accordance with reasonable standards, that the trash bin situation was due to weather delays beyond my control, and that the Christmas lights were scheduled for removal within a reasonable time frame. I also included a paragraph noting that I had witnessed HOA President Patricia Vandermeer deliberately depositing snow and ice from her property onto mine, creating the very safety hazard she was now citing me for. I sent the email and copied the other board members, though I had little hope they would do anything. The response came within 30 minutes. "Mr. Henderson, your accusations are baseless and unprofessional. I was maintaining my property in accordance with HOA standards. Where excess snow falls during the removal process is not within my control. Your violations stand as written. You have 48 hours to comply. Patricia Vandermeer, HOA President." I read the email 3 times, focusing on that phrase. Where excess snow falls during the removal process is not within my control. She was not even trying to hide what she had done. She was just framing it in a way that gave her deniability. I decided to document everything. I went outside with my phone and took pictures and video of my walkway from every angle, showing that it was clear and properly maintained. I filmed myself spreading additional ice melt, time stamping everything. If Patricia wanted to play the documentation game, I could play too. The day passed tensely. I kept watching out my window, half expecting Patricia to come up with some new complaint. Around 3 in the afternoon, I saw her leave in her silver Lexus, and I felt myself relax slightly. That relaxation lasted about 10 minutes. I heard a vehicle pull up outside and looked out to see a tow truck in front of my house. The driver got out and started walking toward my car, which was parked in my driveway. I ran outside. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" The driver, a tired-looking guy in his 40s, held up a work order. "Got a call to tow this vehicle. HOA violation, unauthorized parking." "That is my car in my driveway on my property," I said. He shrugged. "Look, man, I just do what the work order says. Says here the HOA reported a vehicle in violation of parking regulations." "Let me see that," I said. He handed me the paper, and sure enough, there was Patricia's signature as HOA president, claiming my car was parked in violation of Section 8.4 of the HOA bylaws. "This is insane," I muttered, pulling out my phone. I called the number on the work order and got the towing company's dispatcher. After 10 minutes of argument and me reading portions of the HOA bylaws out loud, specifically the part that said residents could park personal vehicles in their own driveways, the dispatcher agreed to cancel the tow. The driver seemed relieved. "Happens more than you would think," he told me as he packed up. "HOAs call us all the time for bogus stuff. We usually catch it before we hook up, but they still charge you the service call fee." "How much?" I asked. $75 for the dispatch." I felt my eye twitch. "I am not paying for a tow I did not authorize for a violation that does not exist. You will have to take that up with whoever called us," the driver said. "We got dispatched, we showed up. That is billable." After he left, I immediately emailed Patricia and the board, demanding an explanation for the attempted tow and making it clear I would not be paying any associated fees. I also made copies of everything, including the work order with Patricia's signature. Her response came an hour later. The vehicle appeared to be improperly parked and potentially abandoned. Upon further review, the tow was canceled. Any dispatch fees are between you and the towing company, not the HOA. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I called my attorney, Melissa, who had handled my home purchase closing. I explained the situation, and she listened patiently. "HOA disputes are tricky," she said when I finished. "They have a lot of latitude, and proving harassment can be difficult. That said, what you are describing sounds like it is crossing some lines. The tow truck thing especially. If she filed a false report to get your vehicle towed, that could be a problem for her." "What are my options?" I asked. "You can request mediation, which some HOA bylaws require before legal action. You can pay the fines under protest and then sue to recover them. Or you can refuse to pay and force them to take you to collections, then fight it. None of these options are quick or cheap. What would you do?" I asked. "Me. I would document everything, comply with the reasonable requests to avoid giving them ammunition, and start building a harassment case. If you can show a pattern of behavior that goes beyond enforcing rules and into personal retaliation, you might have something." We talked for a few more minutes, and she agreed to send me a formal letter to give to Patricia, putting the HOA on notice that I had legal representation and that any further questionable actions would be challenged. That evening, I took down my Christmas lights, even though it was cold and miserable work. I was not giving Patricia any legitimate ammunition. I brought my trash bins into the garage even though trash day was not until Friday. I salted my walkway again for good measure. When I went to bed that night, I felt like I was living in a war zone instead of a nice neighborhood in Colorado. Thursday morning brought new developments. I woke up to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the Pine Ridge Water and Sanitation District, saying that they had received a report of a water leak at my property and would be sending someone to investigate. I had no water leak. My pipes were fine, but I knew immediately who had filed the report. The inspector showed up around 10, a nice guy named Carlos who seemed apologetic about the whole thing. He checked my external pipes, my meter, and even came inside to look at my plumbing. "Everything looks fine," he said. "No leaks, no problems. Do you know who reported this?" "I have a pretty good idea," I said. "My HOA president and I are having a dispute," Carlos sighed. "Yeah, we get that sometimes. People use us to hassle their neighbors. It is a waste of everyone's time." After he left, I added the false water leak report to my growing documentation file. I was building quite a collection. The violation notices, the tow truck incident, the water report, emails, photos, everything. I sent another email to the board, copying my attorney this time, noting that filing false reports with municipal services could constitute harassment and potentially violate local ordinances. I kept my tone professional but firm. Patricia's response was brief. "The HOA has a duty to investigate potential property damage that could affect neighboring homes. The report was filed in good faith." I was starting to understand why people in HOA disputes sometimes snapped and did crazy things. The gaslighting, the circular logic, the abuse of authority, it was all designed to wear you down until you either gave up or moved away. But I was not moving. I had put my life savings into this house, and I was not going to let Patricia Vandermeer drive me out. That afternoon, I decided to go on the offensive. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board against Patricia, citing harassment, abuse of authority, and filing false reports. I included all my documentation, all the emails, everything. I sent copies to every board member individually and demanded a hearing. The response came from Linda, Patricia's sister, who was the board secretary. "Your complaint has been received and will be reviewed at the next board meeting on March 15th. That was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of dealing with Patricia's harassment while waiting for a board that was stacked in her favor to review my complaint. The system was rigged. Friday morning, I got a delivery confirmation that my new coffee maker had arrived. Small victories. I was setting it up when I heard shouting outside. I looked out to see Patricia in my front yard again, this time with her phone held up, apparently recording video. "This is unacceptable," she was yelling. "This is a clear violation of HOA standards." I went outside. "Patricia, what are you doing in my yard? Your mailbox is not regulation height," she declared, pointing at my mailbox, which was at the end of my driveway. "It is 3 inches too low according to Section 12.2 of the bylaws." I stared at her. "My mailbox has been the exact same height since I moved in 2 years ago. You approved it during the home purchase review." "Standards change," she said. "The board voted last month to update mailbox regulations. You were notified." "I was not notified of anything," I said. "The notice was posted on the HOA website," she replied. "Ignorance of rule changes is not an excuse." I took a deep breath. "Patricia, you need to leave my property right now." "I am conducting an inspection as HOA president," she said. "I have the authority to enter common areas and inspect visible property features." "My front yard is not a common area," I said, my voice rising. "You are trespassing." "I am performing my duties," she insisted. "Leave now or I am calling the police," I said. She actually laughed. "Go ahead. I am sure they will be very interested to hear about all your violations." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Patricia's smug expression faltered slightly, but she held her ground. When the dispatcher answered, I calmly explained that I had someone on my property who was refusing to leave. The dispatcher said they would send an officer. Patricia finally backed off my property but stood on the sidewalk, still recording with her phone. "This is harassment of an HOA official," she declared. "I will be filing a complaint." "You do that," I said. We stood there in tense silence for about 15 minutes until a Pine Ridge police cruiser pulled up. An officer got out, a young woman with sharp eyes and a patient demeanor. "What is going on here?" she asked. Patricia immediately launched into her version. "Officer, I am the president of this neighborhood's homeowners association, and I was conducting a routine inspection when this man threatened me and called the police to harass me for doing my job." The officer turned to me. "Sir, what is your side?" I explained that Patricia had been on my property without permission, that we were involved in an HOA dispute, and that I had asked her to leave multiple times before calling the police. The officer looked between us. "Madam, even as HOA president, you do not have the right to enter someone's private property without permission. If you need to conduct inspections, you need to either get permission or inspect from public areas only." "I have the authority under the HOA bylaws," Patricia protested. "HOA bylaws do not override property rights or trespassing laws," the officer said firmly. "If this gentleman asks you to leave his property, you need to leave." Patricia's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. I am trying to maintain community standards." "You can maintain them from public property," the officer said. "If you two are having a dispute, I suggest you work it out through proper legal channels. Madam, I need you to stay off this property unless you are invited." Patricia glared at me like I had personally betrayed her. "Fine. But this is going in my report to the board." She stormed off to her house. The officer turned to me and lowered her voice. "We get a lot of calls about HOA disputes. Document everything. Get a lawyer if you have not already, and if she comes on your property again without permission, call us immediately. That becomes a pattern of behavior, and we can do more." I thanked her, and she left. I went back inside feeling both vindicated and exhausted. It was not even noon, and I was done with this day. I made my first cup of coffee from my new coffee maker, and it tasted like heaven. The weekend was quiet, which made me nervous. Patricia's silver Lexus was in her driveway, so I knew she was home, but she did not come outside or make any moves against me. I took the opportunity to relax and tried not to think about the ongoing war. Monday morning brought a winter storm warning. The Weather Service was predicting another 6 to 8 inches of snow starting Monday night and continuing into Tuesday. I made sure I had plenty of ice melt and gas for my snowblower. I also set up a camera on my front porch aimed at my walkway and driveway. If Patricia tried anything else, I wanted video evidence. The snow started falling Monday evening, heavy and steady. By the time I went to bed around 11, there were already 4 inches on the ground, and it showed no signs of stopping. I woke up Tuesday morning to a winter wonderland. Everything was blanketed in fresh white snow that sparkled in the morning sun. It was beautiful and also a lot of work. I bundled up and headed out with my snowblower around 7. The snow was light and powdery, easy to clear, and I made quick work of my driveway and walkway. I finished around 8:30, went inside to warm up and felt pretty good about getting it done early. Around 9, I looked outside and saw Patricia out with her snow shovel. Here we go again, I thought. I watched carefully, my hand near my phone in case I needed to start recording. Sure enough, after clearing about half of her walkway, Patricia started throwing shovelfuls of snow toward my property. But this time, she was not just tossing it randomly. She was deliberately aiming for my freshly cleared walkway, heaving massive piles of snow and ice across the property line. I grabbed my phone and started recording from my window. The video clearly showed Patricia scooping snow from her walkway and throwing it onto mine, over and over, undoing all the work I had just done. The video also showed her looking directly at my house several times, clearly aware of what she was doing. After about 15 minutes of this, she paused, breathing heavily from the exertion. Then she did something that made my jaw drop. She walked over to my property line, crossed onto my lawn, and used her shovel to spread the snow she had thrown into an even layer across my walkway. She was not even pretending anymore. This was deliberate sabotage. I stopped recording, saved the video, and immediately sent it to my attorney with a message. This is what I am dealing with. What are my options? Then I got dressed and went outside to clear the mess again. Patricia saw me coming and quickly retreated to her own property. "Morning, Patricia," I called out, keeping my voice level. She did not respond, just went back to clearing her own walkway as if nothing had happened. I spent another 30 minutes clearing the snow she had dumped on my property, salting everything heavily. When I finished, I made a point of setting up an additional camera, this one clearly visible and pointed at the property line. I wanted Patricia to know she was being watched. The rest of Tuesday passed without incident, but I could feel the tension building. Patricia had escalated from citations and complaints to actively sabotaging my property maintenance. I wondered what would come next. My attorney called me that afternoon. "I watched the video," Melissa said. "That is clear-cut harassment, possibly property damage depending on how you want to frame it. We can definitely use this. I am drafting a cease and desist letter, and I think we should also file a formal complaint with the county. What she is doing goes beyond HOA enforcement." "Do it," I said. I am done playing defense. Wednesday morning, I had a courier deliver the cease and desist letter to Patricia. I watched from my window as she signed for it, opened it, read it, and then crumpled it up. She looked directly at my house with an expression of pure rage. 20 minutes later, I got an email from the HOA board. Emergency meeting scheduled for that evening at 7 to discuss ongoing disputes and resident behavior issues. Attendance mandatory. I replied that I would be there and that my attorney would be joining me. The meeting was held in the Pine Ridge Community Center, a small building at the entrance to our neighborhood. When I arrived with Melissa at 10 minutes before 7, Patricia was already there with the other board members, Linda, Margaret, and Robert. They were seated at a long table at the front of the room, looking very official. There were also about a dozen other residents scattered in the folding chairs, neighbors who had apparently heard about the dispute and wanted to watch the drama unfold. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. "We are here tonight to address serious issues regarding resident Ethan Henderson and his repeated violations of HOA standards, refusal to comply with board directives, and harassment of board members." Melissa stood up. "Excuse me, but my client is here to address the harassment he has been experiencing from Mrs. Vandermeer, including documented instances of property sabotage, false reports to municipal services, and abuse of her authority as HOA president." Patricia's face turned red. "You are out of order. This is not a legal proceeding." "Actually," Melissa said calmly, "under Colorado HOA statutes, residents have the right to legal representation at board meetings, and all parties have the right to present evidence and testimony. Unless you want to add violating state law to the list of issues we are discussing." The room got very quiet. Linda leaned over and whispered something to Patricia, who looked like she wanted to explode but managed to control herself. "Fine," Patricia said through gritted teeth. "Mr. Henderson, You may present your grievances." I stood up and laid out everything. The excessive violation notices, the snow dumping, the false tow truck call, the false water leak report, the trespassing incident. Melissa displayed photos and videos on her laptop, including the clear footage of Patricia deliberately throwing snow onto my property. When the video played, I heard gasps and murmurs from the other residents. Several people pulled out their phones and started recording the screen. Patricia tried to interrupt multiple times, but Melissa shut her down each time, citing proper meeting procedures that Patricia herself had written into the bylaws. When I finished, Melissa addressed the board. "What we have here is a clear pattern of harassment and abuse of authority. Mrs. Vandermeer has used her position to target my client with excessive and often invalid citations, has filed false reports with municipal and private services, and has deliberately damaged his property. This goes far beyond HOA enforcement and into the realm of harassment and potentially criminal mischief." "That is absurd," Patricia shouted, standing up. "I have done nothing but try to maintain the standards of this community. If Mr. Henderson would simply follow the rules like everyone else, none of this would be necessary. Everyone else is not getting violation notices for trash cans being out during a snowstorm," I said. "Everyone else is not having their property sabotaged." Margaret, who had been silent until now, raised her hand tentatively. "Patricia, I have to say, that video is pretty damning. You clearly threw snow onto his property." "I was clearing my walkway," Patricia insisted. "Where the snow lands is not my responsibility." "But you walked onto his property and spread it around with your shovel," Robert pointed out. "That is not just clearing your walkway." "You are all supposed to be supporting the board," Patricia snapped at them. "We are the board," Linda said quietly. "And I think we need to take these accusations seriously." The meeting devolved into arguing for the next hour. Other residents started chiming in, and it turned out I was not the only one who had problems with Patricia. Tom, my neighbor who had been fined while in the hospital, stood up and shared his story. The Johnsons talked about the hopscotch incident. Another woman described getting cited for having a garden gnome that was not aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. It became clear that Patricia had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom, and people were tired of it. Finally, around 9 o'clock, Robert made a motion to suspend Patricia from her duties as HOA president pending an investigation into the harassment allegations. Linda seconded it. The vote was 3-1 with only Patricia voting against. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. "You cannot do this. I am the president." "You were the president," Robert said. "As of now, you are on administrative leave. I will assume presidential duties until we resolve this." Patricia grabbed her papers and her clipboard and stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door behind her. The room erupted in conversation. Several neighbors came up to thank me for standing up to her. Melissa told me this was a good outcome, but to stay vigilant because people like Patricia did not go down quietly. I drove home feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this was finally over. I should have known better. Thursday morning, I woke up to find all 4 of my tires slashed. Deep cuts in the sidewalls, completely irreparable. I called the police immediately and filed a report. I also checked my security cameras, but they had been positioned to watch my walkway and front door, not my driveway. I had no footage of who did it. The responding officer, a different one this time, took my statement and asked if I had any enemies or ongoing disputes. "I have an ongoing HOA dispute," I said, "and one of the board members was just suspended last night." The officer took down Patricia's information. "We will follow up, but without video evidence or witnesses, it is going to be hard to prove anything." I called my insurance company and then a tow truck to get my car to a tire shop. 4 new tires cost me $800 after the deductible. I was furious, but tried to keep perspective. This was probably Patricia's last gasp, her way of getting revenge before slinking away. Friday was quiet. Too quiet. I worked from home, kept checking my cameras and waited for the other shoe to drop. Saturday morning, that shoe dropped, though not in the way I expected. I was having coffee and catching up on emails when I heard sirens. Multiple sirens, getting closer. I looked out to see police cars and an ambulance pulling up in front of Patricia's house. I went outside, and several other neighbors did the same. We stood in little clusters, watching as paramedics rushed into Patricia's house with a stretcher. Tom came over to me. "What happened?" "No idea," I said. About 10 minutes later, the paramedics emerged with Patricia on the stretcher. Even from across the street, I could see she was conscious and looked furious rather than hurt. Her right leg was at an odd angle, possibly broken. The police officers stayed behind, and one of them started walking around Patricia's property, taking pictures. He spent a lot of time photographing her walkway and the area near her front door. After the ambulance left, I worked up the nerve to approach the officer. "Excuse me, is everything okay? I live across the street." The officer looked up from his notes. "Are you the homeowner who filed the report about the tire slashing?" "Yes, Ethan Henderson." He nodded slowly. "Interesting. Do you know Miss Vandermeer well?" "We have been in a dispute," I said carefully. "She is the HOA president." "Was the HOA president," I corrected. "She told the paramedics she slipped on ice on her walkway," the officer said. "But here is the thing. Her walkway is clear. No ice. But the walkway leading from her driveway to the side door, which she apparently uses when taking out trash, that walkway is a solid sheet of ice. And there is a pile of snow and ice at the base of it that looks like it was dumped there." I felt a cold sensation in my stomach. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" The officer showed me a photo on his phone. It clearly showed the side walkway covered in ice, with what looked like chunks of snow and ice piled at one end. "I am saying it looks like someone cleared snow from one area and dumped it on this side walkway, and Miss Vandermeer did not realize it was there when she went out this morning. She apparently took a nasty fall. Possible broken leg, maybe ankle, definitely some bruising. But who would?" I trailed off as realization hit. The officer watched my face. "According to our reports, Miss Vandermeer has been involved in a pattern of dumping snow from her walkway onto neighboring properties. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. "I have video of her doing it to my property." "I am going to need to see that video," the officer said, "because right now it looks like Miss Vandermeer cleared her front walkway and dumped all the snow and ice on her own side walkway and then forgot about it. When she went out to take her trash to the bins this morning, she slipped on the ice she had created." I almost laughed, but managed to control myself. "I will send you the videos right away." The officer gave me his email address, and I sent him everything I had. All the videos of Patricia dumping snow, the photos, the timeline of events. He reviewed them on his phone right there on the street. "This is excellent documentation," he said. "I am going to talk to my sergeant about this. If Miss Vandermeer created a hazardous condition through her own actions that resulted in injury, that is one thing. But given the pattern of behavior and the ongoing dispute, we might be looking at reckless endangerment or other charges." "Charges against Patricia?" I asked. "Possibly," he said. "If she was deliberately creating dangerous conditions, even on her own property, that can be a problem. Plus, there is still the matter of your slashed tires. I would like to see if there are any other cameras in the neighborhood that might have caught something." He spent the next hour canvassing the street, talking to neighbors. It turned out that the Johnsons had a security camera that faced the street, and it had caught footage of Patricia walking over to my driveway around 3 in the morning on Thursday with what looked like a knife in her hand. The video was grainy and dark, but it was clearly Patricia, and the timestamp was right. By Saturday afternoon, the police had enough to obtain a warrant to search Patricia's house. They found the knife, still with rubber residue on it, in her garage. Sunday afternoon, I got a call from the police department. Patricia had been arrested and charged with criminal mischief for the tire slashing and reckless endangerment for creating the hazardous ice condition that led to her own injury. The irony was not lost on anyone. The HOA board, now under Robert's leadership, issued a statement suspending Patricia permanently and stripping her of all board authority. They also announced a comprehensive review of all violations issued in the past year and a plan to refund fines that were deemed excessive or unjustified. I got a check for $450 in the mail the following week. Patricia's arraignment was scheduled for late February. According to Robert, who kept me updated, she was facing possible jail time for the criminal mischief charge, though her attorney was arguing for probation and restitution. The reckless endangerment charge was more complicated because she had injured herself, but the prosecutor was arguing that her pattern of creating dangerous conditions put others at risk too. In early March, Patricia pled no contest to the criminal mischief charge in exchange for the reckless endangerment charge being dropped. She was sentenced to 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for my tires. She also had to resign permanently from the HOA board. The judge, a woman in her 60s who looked thoroughly unimpressed with the whole situation, gave Patricia a lecture about abusing positions of authority and using community organizations as vehicles for personal vendettas. It was deeply satisfying to watch. Patricia's leg healed, though she walked with a slight limp. She kept to herself after that, rarely leaving her house. Several neighbors told me she had put her house on the market. In April, a for sale sign appeared in her front yard. By May, it sold. I was not home the day she moved out, but Tom texted me a photo of the moving truck with a simple message. The witch is dead. The HOA, under new leadership, became much more reasonable. Robert turned out to be a fair and practical president. He streamlined the rules, eliminated a lot of the petty regulations Patricia had implemented, and established a proper review process for violations. The neighborhood became a much more pleasant place to live. I never did find out if Patricia understood the irony of what happened. She had spent months harassing me over snow and ice on my walkway, had deliberately created hazardous conditions on my property, and then injured herself by doing the exact same thing on her own property. She had quite literally slipped on her own icy walkway after dumping snow on it, just as she had been dumping snow on mine. The security camera I had installed captured one final moment that I sometimes watch when I need a laugh. It is footage from the morning Patricia slipped, time stamped about 5 minutes before the incident. The video shows her carrying a trash bag from her front door, walking confidently across her front walkway that she had meticulously cleared and salted. Then she turns the corner toward the side of the house where her trash bins are kept. The walkway she had apparently forgotten was covered in the snow and ice she had dumped there herself while clearing other areas. The camera angle does not show the actual fall, but it captures the moment she disappears around the corner, and about 10 seconds later you can hear a loud yell and the sound of trash scattering. Karma, it turns out, has perfect timing. By summer, the neighborhood had returned to normal. New families moved in, including a young couple who bought Patricia's house. They were friendly and normal and had no interest in serving on the HOA board, which was perfectly fine with everyone. I still think about the whole saga sometimes, usually when I am shoveling snow in the winter. It is a reminder that positions of authority, even small ones like HOA president, can bring out the worst in people. It is also a reminder that people who create problems for others often end up creating bigger problems for themselves. The neighborhood learned some valuable lessons too. After the Patricia situation, residents became much more engaged in HOA matters. Board meetings now regularly have a dozen or more attendees, and people actually read the bylaws and vote on rule changes. There is real oversight and accountability, which is how it should have been all along. I learned some lessons too. I learned to document everything, to stand up for myself even when it is difficult, and to not let bullies win through intimidation. I also learned that a good attorney is worth every penny, and that security cameras are one of the best investments a homeowner can make. My relationship with the other neighbors improved significantly. Tom and I became good friends, often having beers on the weekend and commiserating about HOA horror stories. The Johnsons invited me over for dinner, and their kids drew a hopscotch grid on my driveway with my permission, which made them very happy. Even Margaret, who had been one of Patricia's allies, apologized to me for not speaking up sooner. The whole experience, as stressful and frustrating as it was, actually brought the community together in a way that years of Patricia's rigid rule enforcement never did. People looked out for each other more, communicated better, and treated each other with more respect and understanding. In a weird way, Patricia's campaign of harassment against me ended up being the best thing that could have happened to the neighborhood. It exposed the problems with how the HOA was being run, it galvanized people to take action, and it resulted in meaningful reforms that made life better for everyone. Except Patricia, of course. But she brought that on herself, quite literally. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia moved to an apartment in Denver, somewhere with no HOA and no community responsibilities. I hope she found peace there, though I suspect someone with her personality probably found new battles to fight and new people to harass. As for me, I am still in my house in Pine Ridge, enjoying my properly cleared walkway, my regulation height mailbox, my Christmas lights that I take down whenever I get around to it within reason, and my trash bins that sometimes stay out a few extra hours without the world ending. Life is good when you are not living under the thumb of an HOA tyrant. Life is even better when that tyrant gets exactly what they deserve, courtesy of their own actions. Every winter, when the first snow falls, I make sure to clear my walkway thoroughly. Then I spread ice melt generously, not because I am afraid of HOA violations, but because it is the right thing to do. Safety matters, even if it took Patricia Vandermeer slipping on her own icy walkway to remind everyone of that fact. And if I occasionally glance across the street at the house Patricia used to own and feel a little surge of satisfaction, well, I think I have earned that. The new owners keep their walkway clear too, and they have never once dumped snow on my property. It is amazing how easy neighborly relations can be when people act like reasonable human beings. The criminal case against Patricia concluded in June with her completing her probation and community service without incident. I never saw her again after the sentencing hearing, which was fine with me. Some chapters in life are best left closed. The HOA continues to function smoothly under Robert's leadership. We have had a few minor disputes and rule discussions, but nothing that could not be resolved through normal, rational conversation. It turns out that most people, when treated with respect and given reasonable guidelines, are happy to maintain their properties and contribute to a pleasant neighborhood environment. I even ended up joining the HOA board myself in the fall, mostly to ensure that what happened with Patricia never happened again. I serve as the compliance officer, but my approach is very different from hers. I believe in education and communication first, violations as a last resort, and always considering individual circumstances and context. We have not issued a single fine in the 8 months I have been on the board. We have had a few conversations with residents about property maintenance, but every single issue has been resolved through friendly dialogue and mutual understanding. Imagine that. Looking back on the whole experience, I realize it taught me something important about community and conflict. Patricia saw the HOA as a tool for control and enforcement, a way to impose her vision of perfection on everyone around her. But a real community is not about control or perfection. It is about people working together, compromising, supporting each other, and allowing for the fact that everyone is human and makes mistakes. Patricia forgot that, if she ever knew it at all. She treated her neighbors like subjects to be ruled rather than people to be respected. And in the end, her need for control and her campaign of petty harassment literally brought her down, right on her own icy walkway that she had created through her own spiteful actions. There is something almost poetic about that. These days, when I go outside on a winter morning to clear my walkway, I do it carefully and thoroughly. I pile the snow on my own lawn where it will not bother anyone. I salt and ice melt the cleared areas to keep them safe. And I never, ever throw snow onto my neighbor's property, because that is just common courtesy and basic decency. It is really not that complicated. Patricia made it complicated because she wanted power and control. The rest of us just want to live our lives, maintain our homes, and get along with our neighbors. Pine Ridge is a better place now, and my part in making that happen, even though it was stressful and costly and frustrating, is something I can be proud of. Standing up to a bully is never easy, but it is always worth it, especially when the bully literally slips on their own icy walkway and faces criminal charges for the harassment they inflicted. I could not have written a better ending if I tried. The snow will fall again next winter, and I will be ready with my shovel and my ice melt and my security cameras. But I do not expect any drama. Patricia is gone, the HOA is functioning properly, and the neighborhood has learned its lesson about giving one person too much unchecked authority. Sometimes the universe has a way of correcting imbalances, and sometimes that correction involves an icy walkway, a nasty fall, and criminal charges that stick. Patricia wanted to rule the neighborhood through fear and violations and petty harassment. Instead, she ended up as a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting power go to your head and treating people with cruelty and disrespect. I hope she learned something from the experience, but honestly, I do not spend much time thinking about it. I am too busy enjoying my life in a neighborhood that finally feels like a community instead of a prison. And every time I clear my walkway in the winter, doing it the right way with care and consideration, I remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting karma handle the rest. Patricia dumped snow on my walkway trying to make my life difficult. She ended up slipping on her own icy walkway and destroying her own life instead. That is justice in its purest form, delivered not by lawyers or judges or HOA boards, but by simple physics and poetic irony. I still live in Pine Ridge, Colorado. I still maintain my property properly. I still follow reasonable rules and contribute to the community. And I never, ever forget the winter when HOA Karen Patricia Vandermeer tried to bury me in violations and harassment, only to literally slip on the icy consequences of her own actions. It was the winter I learned that standing up for yourself matters, that documenting everything is crucial, and that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about delivering justice. And it was the winter that Patricia learned, the hard way, that creating hazards for others has a way of creating even bigger hazards for yourself. I could not have asked for a better outcome.